Welcome to Topics of Today. My name is Matt Largent, President and CEO of Williamson, Inc. We're Williamson County's Chamber of Commerce and Economic Development organization. I want to start by thanking Pinnacle Financial Partners for sponsoring today's event. Pinnacle is a great corporate citizen. They support a lot of different causes in Middle Tennessee, and my friend Brad Dunn, I know, is watching now in his office. So Brad, thank you so much. Pinnacle, thank you so much. We really appreciate all you do for us and all you do for everybody in Williamson County and Middle Tennessee. I also want to thank the Bellevue-Harpeth Chamber of Commerce, Murray Alliance, the Spring Hill Chamber of Commerce for partnering on this important conversation today. I also want to thank AP Live for letting us use their studio space. If you or your business needs a place to record a message, to have a meeting in a secure location, please visit AP Live's website and ask how you can access their space as well. Before we jump into today's program, I just want to remind everybody the importance of wearing a mask and physically distancing when you're out in public. That is incredibly important. A mask keeps other people safe, and when other people wear masks, they keep you safe. So please, we've seen a slight increase in number of new cases over the past few weeks, so make sure you wear that mask and distance, especially when you're in a confined space. I also want to take this moment to remind you to check our website out for current information. It's williamsonchamber.com/coronavirus. We have some great resources on the site, especially focused on reopening right now. We have a list of personal protective equipment suppliers. We also have a list of outdoor meeting space that you can meet in around the county. So if you don't want to be in a confined space and still meet with your clients, check out this list on our website, williamsonchamber.com/coronavirus. Also, I know we're focusing today on small business and SBA. Kel McDowell in our office is here to help you if you need anything else from an SBA standpoint. So please feel free to reach out to Kel McDowell at kel@williamsonchamber.com. I am thrilled to welcome today's program. It's very topical. We have two guests with us today. LaTanya Channel is the State Director for Tennessee at the U.S. Small Business Administration. And joining me in the studio is Rhodes from Pinnacle Financial Partners. She's the Senior Vice President of SBA Lending for Pinnacle. LaTanya, I know how busy you are and how much you and your team have worked and given over these past several months to small businesses across the state. So I can't tell you how much I appreciate you coming back and sharing what you've learned on our program. I understand you have a presentation on the latest modifications of the Paycheck Protection Program. So LaTanya, at this time, the show is yours.
Good morning. I'll just make sure you can hear me. Do a quick sound check.
Yes, we can hear you.
Excellent. Awesome. Thank you so much. So I'm going to quickly go through the changes that occurred on June the 5th, Friday, June the 5th, when the president signed off on the PPP Paycheck Protection Program Flexibility Act. But first of all, I want to thank you all again for hosting this webinar. I think it's awesome that multiple chambers are coming together to make sure the information gets out to the business community. I also want to mention that Lane is one of our award-winning SBA lenders and has been in the trenches with us handling PPP from the very beginning. So I'm glad you were able to reach out to her and have her join today as well. So you can go to the next slide or the very first slide. This is just a quick reminder on this slide that the purpose of the PPP loan program is to help you bring your employees back and to keep your workforce employed. We get a lot of questions coming into our office about the PPP loan, how it's supposed to be used, to make sure that folks can get the maximum forgiveness. And we always want to just remind people that the primary purpose of the PPP program is to keep your employees employed. So that should be the primary focus of how you use these funds and how you pay attention to what's happening with how you're using the funds in order to get forgiveness. So this first slide probably has what your members are already aware of from the prior presentation that we did, and because many of them have probably already received their PPP loan. But in short, those loans are up to $10 million. Can you all still see me? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
We can see and hear you.
Awesome. I'm not sure why there's two screens showing my name. We'll figure that out in a minute from Zoom. But anyway, those loans are up to $10 million. The interest rate, of course, is at 1%. There is a deferment of the payment for when you, as the borrower, start paying it back. I did want to note on this slide in red, please remember that interest continues to accrue from when that loan is dispersed to you until your first payment. No collateral, as many of you are already aware, and no personal guarantees, no borrower or lender fees payable to SBA. And the borrower should not have to pay any fees to anyone for a PPP loan. So this is just really an overview for those who have not gotten a PPP and those who are looking into it, because funds are still available and lenders are still accepting applications. You can go to the next slide. So, as I mentioned, on June the 5th, the president signed the Paycheck Protection Program Flexibility Act, and it made several changes to the PPP. One of the biggest changes that occurred is that for the period that we're calling the covered period for loan forgiveness, as many of you are aware, when you received those loan funds from your lender, you previously had 8 weeks in order to spend those funds down in order to be eligible for forgiveness. As of June 5th, for any loans that were approved on June 5th or after, that period is automatically now extended to 24 weeks after the date of the loan disbursement for the loan. If you would like to have your loan that was approved before the 5th extended beyond the 8 weeks, you do have to reach out to your lender and request that extension. Again, for any loans that were approved before the 5th. Another change that came out of the Paycheck Protection Program Flexibility Act is it lowered the amount of the loan proceeds that must be used for payroll. And I'm emphasizing on the word must, because in order to be eligible for forgiveness, previously the amount of the loan that had to be used was 75% of those loan proceeds. That is now down to 60%, must be used for the loan proceeds. I also want to make sure you pay attention to the word "and" on this slide. At the very bottom where it says loans will be forgiven as long as 60% of the funds are used to keep employees on the payroll, and 40% for certain other expenses. Here's what that means. There is a list of expenses that are in the guidelines that are on the Treasury and SBA site. If you use 40% of those loan proceeds for those other expenses that are listed there, and 60% for payroll, at least 60% for payroll, if you use it for other expenses that are not mentioned in the regulations and not mentioned in the law, then that small portion is not eligible for forgiveness and would turn into a loan. So I just want to be mindful of how that 60-40 split looks, making sure that you use for those expenses that are listed in the Treasury website. I forgot to mention earlier that I have several of my team on the line. Jacqueline Merritt, who many of you may know, is on the line, and she posted on the chat just now the link to the Treasury website that has the rules and has the list of those expenses. I also want to be mindful that you are aware that, again, the rules allow 60% towards payroll, but that's at least 60% towards payroll. You could spend more than that on payroll for your employees. You can go to the next slide. In addition, again, these are changes as of June 5th under the Payroll Protection Program Flexibility Act as of June 5th, extending the loan term. So for any loans that are approved after June the 5th, that loan term is now automatically at 5 years. If your loan was approved before then, you have to make that request to your lender, and it has to be a mutual agreement between you and your lender to go from the original 2 years to the 5 years. I also want to note a change from the June 5th signing of the Flexibility Act is also the deferral period. Previously, it was 6 months deferral. After you were expending the funds, in order to get to submit your loan application, the forgiveness application, and also to receive forgiveness. Now you have a full 10 months. So here's what that means. If you look at the rules on that link that Jacqueline Merritt has just posted in the chat in the Treasury site, when you read those rules, it's going to continually talk about the forgiveness period. And when we talk about the forgiveness period, that's either the 8 weeks or the 24 weeks that I mentioned that you have in order to spend the loan funds that are dispersed to you. Previously, you had 6 months after you had dispersed all the funds to submit that loan application form, and the payment was deferred for 6 months after all the loan funds had been you had spent all the loan funds. Now, again, you have the 8 or the 24 weeks during the forgiveness period. Now you have 10 months. So what that means is, let's say you received a loan today, and so that means you automatically got the 24 weeks to spend down those loan funds on the appropriate items that you can spend it for, the payroll and the other expenses that are listed in the Treasury website. After that, you have 10 months to make sure you get that loan forgiveness application into your lender. And also within that 10 months, that's the deferral period for the payment of the loan. Please remember what I said earlier, that interest is still accruing. So make sure you please pay attention to that. You can go to the next slide. Also, a change from the June 5th signing of the paycheck, and sometimes I say payroll, sometimes I say paycheck, paycheck payroll protection program, the PPP Flexibility Act, is that there's now what's called a safe harbor for if you could not return your business to the same level of business activity that you had before the February or so deadline date that's listed in the regulations. So basically what that means is, of course, Congress and SBA and Treasury had heard that businesses, because there were restrictions on when they could open and when they could operate, and they only had the 8 weeks, the question was, wait a minute, how am I in 8 weeks going to resume business operations to the same level it was before February, and also spend these funds down on payroll? So now there's a safe harbor when you cannot return to the same level of business activity as before. And so you just make that known when you submit your loan application to your lender, loan forgiveness application to your lender. Same thing, there's also another safe harbor that was put in the PPP Flexibility Act as it concerns your employees. There were concerns that businesses were not able to bring back employees that they had to let go. And there was also a concern that when they couldn't bring those employees back, the same ones, that they weren't able to rehire. So now there is a safe harbor provision that addresses your ability or inability to bring back those employees who you had to let go, and the fact that you could not bring on other employees. You won't be penalized that as it concerns forgiveness going forward. June 30th, 2020. We put that in bold because here's what you really, really need to know. That June 30th, 2020 deadline remains as the last date for the lender to get approval from SBA for your PPP loan. That is not your deadline to get your loan application into the lender. June 30th, 2020 remains the deadline for your lender to get approval from SBA. So what that means is you need to already be working with the lender, and if not, looking for a lender pretty quickly in hopes to get your application into them soon so that they can get their requests into SBA, and our headquarters handles that. It is not handled here in our Tennessee office, so that they can get the approval from our SBA headquarters on your loan. So be mindful that that June 30th date is not for the borrower, it's for the lender. So borrowers need to apply much sooner and should already hopefully have a lender that they're already working with. And then one final change that also came out of the PPP Flexibility Act, which was signed on June 5th, is there were some concerns about how far SBA was looking back if a particular borrower or an applicant had some issues with being convicted of a crime. So if the conviction was non-financial related, that period of SBA looking back and whether or not you're eligible for that loan has been reduced down to 1 year, whereas before it was looking back to 5 years. You can go to the next slide. So what I just mentioned was some of the changes out of the Flexibility Act. I'm going to scooch through these next slides really quickly, but I wanted to make sure that the chamber still had them because these are not related to PPP, but we still get questions on them. We recognize that many businesses have applied for the Economic Injury Disaster Loan. That is a loan to which you apply directly with the Small Business Administration. Once again, you do not apply here in Tennessee. Those loan applications are processed by our SBA Office of Disaster Assistance. The decisions are made there as well. And last week, some of you may have heard that there was a congressional hearing asking our agency what was taking so long, and is it true that these loans are now down to $150,000, whereas before that they were $2 million. So like you, me and my staff also watched that hearing, and if you paid attention to that hearing, it was confirmed that these economic injuries disaster loans, as it relates to COVID-19, are now being capped at $150,000 in order to get to a larger number of businesses that applied. But if you have any questions on that, please feel free to call my office. Yes, the other thing I want to mention is that currently the portal that opened back up for economic injury disaster loans is only available to agriculture-related businesses right now, but we're hearing that it's open back soon for non-ag-related businesses. I also want those of you who are watching the webinar today to be mindful that if you applied before the portal closed and you have a loan application number that began with a 2, please call our SBA disaster office or reach out to my office directly because we want to make sure that those applications that were submitted that began with a 2, which are the older applications, do actually get processed and actually get processed as quickly as possible. You can go to the next slide. And again, I'm going to quickly go through the next ones so we can take some time for questions. I just want to mention as it concerns the Economic Injury Disaster Loan or EIDL advance, a lot of people thought that they were applying for a $10,000 grant. It is not a grant. It was an advance on a loan, and the loan was for an economic injury disaster loan. Well, there were some changes midway through that, and our agency headquarters made changes. Initially, it was $10,000 for each business. That was changed to $1,000 per employee, and make sure that you had the owner included there. So we're getting lots of questions from people who are getting an approval or a decline for the loan and saying, I didn't know I applied for a loan for an economic injuries disaster. For COVID-19, I thought I was applying for a $10,000 grant. You are applying for a loan that came with an advance, and that advance is forgivable, which in the news you hear becomes a grant. But it's actually a forgivable advance. You actually applied for a loan. You can decide that you don't want the loan anymore, and you would still be able to keep that advance, and you would not have to pay it back. So if you have any questions about that, please, again, give my office a call, and I'll give you the phone number before I'm done so you can figure out what you got. I talked to a business last week who didn't realize that they actually had the advance. We had to walk them through, check your bank account because you might not get a notice. And she was wondering, well, why do I have a loan? So again, call our office and we can help you with that. You can go to the next slide. Also, just a couple of things. When you do get a response from our Office of Disaster Assistance, as it concerns the Economic Injury Disaster Loan, it will be via an email. Okay, and that is going to be the email. It's a really long email that you see on the screen. And if for those of you who can't see it, it says disaster customer service stage at rapidfinance.com. You'll notice it does not say .gov at the end. So if you're confused as to whether or not that's from SBA, it is. Just call our office for any emails that you may get about the economic injury disaster loan, and we can confirm whether or not it's actually legitimate. But once you get that email about the loan, that is your opportunity to log into the portal and it'll give you all these instructions. And that is your opportunity also to go in and make changes and verify that your information is correct. We have been getting a lot of inquiry from business owners, and we've also been getting a lot of feedback from the staff in SBA's Office of Disaster Assistance that the banking information and routing information was incorrect, that the business name was incorrect, that the banking information didn't match the business name that was provided. So when you get that email, make sure you take that chance to go into the portal and verify the bank name, the account number, the routing number, and also the name of the account. And also, please be mindful that you do have 60 days from approval to actually accept your EIDL loan. So take a couple of those days and call our office, call the SBA Office of Disaster Assistance to make sure you're following all the steps correctly. Also, if you are declined for an economic injury disaster loan, I did mention that for the advance, you would not have to pay that back, even if you were declined for the loan. But if you were declined and you feel that that was in error, please reach out to our office if you need help following that reconsideration process. However, I really want your first call to be to the SBA disaster office, that 1-800 number. But if you can't get through, yes, we've heard reports that's been an issue, give a call to our office and we may have some tips and tricks to get over to those folks a little sooner. Either we can give them to you, or maybe we can shoot an email over there to give you a better reply. But follow those instructions, not a better reply, a quicker reply. So follow those instructions that you may get if you decide that you want to do a reconsideration. You can go to the next slide. I'm going to try to sum this up real quickly so we can have room for question. I just also want to note on this slide, we've already talked about PPP on the left. We've already talked about the EIDL loan advance. On the right, where it says SBA Express Bridge Loan and SBA Debt Relief, just please know that out of the CARES Act, there is something called an SBA Express Bridge Loans. SBA Express loans have been around for quite some time. We do have a list of SBA Express lenders, but that is a quick way to get your hands on $25,000 for an SBA loan just to help you with some of your working capital needs. And SBA debt relief that came out of the CARES Act is if you had an existing SBA loan or existing SBA loan debt, then your P&I was paid for a certain period of time and you did not have to make payments on that. So call our office and we can get you further information on that. So if you already had an existing loan, an SBA backed loan, how you can get some relief there that came out of the CARES Act. You can fast forward to the next slide. So these next slides just go into the bridge loan. You can go to the next one. This next slide mentions about the debt relief. If you had an existing 7A 504 microloan, those fees are already being paid, will be paid by SBA, and you do not have to pay them. If that's not happening, give us a call. We can help you contact your lender, or you can reach directly out to your lender to make sure that those buttons get pushed by our SBA headquarters office that pushes those buttons so you would not have to make those payments. Same thing as it concerns any disaster loans. We still have businesses in the Nashville area applying for disaster-related loans from the March 3rd tornado. We have businesses that are still applying for the Chattanooga area tornado that happened over Easter weekend. And all of those loans are automatically deferred through December 31st, 2020. And that again came out of the CARES Act. You can go to the next slide, which should be our final slide summing up. Just fast forward through those. This just explains the different types of loans that came out of the disaster loans from the tornado. There were damage loans and economic injury loans. We'll take any questions on that towards the end if anyone has any. You can go forward to the next slide. Same thing here, just explains the economic injury disaster loans as it relates to the tornado and storms, which is slightly different, but essentially the same type of loan for those who applied for the COVID-19 economic injury loan. Well, we'll take any questions you have on that. You can go to the next slide. So basically, this is the 1-800 number, which we know has been a struggle for many people to get through. If you call our office, again, that we may have some tips and tricks to try to get through faster. There's also an email that's kind of long. We didn't put it on this slide, but if you call our office, we can shoot an email over on your behalf. Keep you looped in that email as well if you're still waiting for status on your EIDL loan. Again, unfortunately, we don't process those loans here locally, but we can help you reach out to our disaster office to hopefully get a status on those. You can go to the next slide. We want to make sure you're aware and you're signed up for our newsletter for the district office. That's on this slide as well. Also, the links at the very bottom of this slide tell you where to get the information on the PPP loan program. And again, any member of my team can get those to you. And I know my team has been posting that in the chat as well. You can go to the next slide. So if you're looking to reach us, just call us at 615-736-5881. And when I say us, I have a team of 10 people that cover the entire state of Tennessee, and all of us have the same information. All of us are working full time, even though we're working 8 to 4:30 to answer the phone. Most of us are working to 8, 9, 10 o'clock at night to answer other email inquiries and handle other back office work that we need to handle. So we're working almost 24 hours around the clock. We're sleeping though, just to get the information you need as quickly as we can to you, as succinctly as we can to you, as it concerns PPP and EIDL. So with that, I'll turn it back over to you in the studio.
Great. Thank you so much, LaTanya, for that explanation, for the new information. That was really helpful. And look, I can't speak for the other 49 states across the country, but I think we probably have the best state director in the United States. So thank you for the great work you and your team have done to help our small businesses, which is the lifeblood of our state across Tennessee. So thank you, LaTanya. I really appreciate it.
I have the best
staff. I want to let the
staff.
audience know who's watching that there is a live Q&A feature. So if you want to put your question in live, I'll make sure that gets asked. If not, LaTanya's team is there to get to all the questions, but just know the live Q&A, or the Q&A is live. So please feel free to submit your question that way. Happy to ask that. I'll go ahead and start with you, LaTanya and Lane. It's the same question, but we found in the survey we did probably about a month or so ago, 213 people responded to the survey, and we learned that actually 53% of people who responded to our survey actually were awarded grants for 10 or fewer employees. One of our big concerns when this came out of the gate is there's a big difference between a company with 5 employees and a company with 450. But what we found is that even the smaller companies benefited from this. The average award or median award was $100,000. The range was $5,400 to $8 million. So based on what we learned from the survey, this seemed like a really great program that met the immediate needs of the business community in Williamson County. LaTanya, I'll start with you, and then I'll go over to you, Lane. Talk about the experience for you and your team of going this and walking with these companies. What really stood out to you about this, LaTanya?
I think what stood out, a couple of things stood out. I think the first thing that stood out was the fact that we had our regular, normal lenders that we deal with every day who were already standing ready to help these businesses get access to the loans. Absolutely. I think the second thing that stood out for us is because, and this is where, I have to get in my apology mode. This program rolled out so quickly and so fast that a lot of the guidance just wasn't there. But we were impressed with the fact that a lot of business owners found us. Some didn't know we were here in Tennessee, ready, willing, able to help. And that the business owners jumped on it so quickly. So I'm happy to hear that over half were the smaller businesses that got it. There have been tons of report about how these large major corporations got access to PPP and the smaller businesses did not. So that is really good to know that the small businesses got it. I will say that I have one of the best teams around the country. And at one point, my staff, we were fielding about 500 to 600 phone calls a day. And they were from small business owners trying to make sure that they could get access to this to save their businesses.
Yeah, and that's really important. Again, it's a lifeblood. A lot of people in our community depend on these small businesses, and in Williamson County, I'm sure it's true across the country. 90% of our employers who employ people are that 10 or fewer number. So small business definitely plays a key role in the economy. Lane, same question to you. What did you learn going through this process with the businesses that you interacted with? What did you take away from the hard work that you did? Brad told me that there were times where you had your team up to 1 a.m. processing these loans. So tell me what stood out to you during this process.
Yeah, definitely. I kind of echo LaTanya's comments of it was really great to see everybody come together and work to help the small business owners. And and small, large, they all were able to get in and get funded. And the program got better as it went on. I mean, I know LaTanya mentioned it was rolled out really quickly, which, you know, anything that's rolled out quickly, you're going to have some hiccups, you're going to have some bumps in the road, but we learned from those mistakes and we were agile and the program adapted. And I think the final product that we have right now is really a great product. The CARES Act was full of lots of different benefits, but I do feel like the PPP program was one of the best that truly impacted the people that needed the money the most. And so I think that's important that it was targeted at small business owners. Small business owners were able to get it and they were able to keep employees paid.
Yeah, I think that's the whole purpose around the PPP for sure. Talk about, Lane, some of the differences between round one and two. I mean, it's if you think about the scope of deploying a program nationwide, it's pretty amazing that it happened the way it did. But talk about some of the things that were the differences between the round one and round two.
Yeah, round one for us was like fast and furious. We were getting all these applications in and trying to process them as fast as we could, using a manual process. Because it was rolled out so quickly, we weren't able to put an automated process into place until after a few weeks. And so that was the biggest difference for us with heading over to round two, was once we got into round two, we had an automated process all set up, ready to go, and we were able to process a lot more applications in a very short amount of time. In fact, Matt, we heard from clients that submitted their application in the morning and by the afternoon they had their loan documents and were getting funded. And so that was very different from round one, where it probably took us 2 or 3 days, sometimes even a week, to process the application, and then another few days for us to actually fund the money.
Well, like LaTanya said, you were in the trenches with them. So clearly you all distinguish yourself as one of the premier lenders in Middle Tennessee and helping out the small businesses in our community. LaTanya, we've actually got 2 live questions. I'll go ahead and start with the first one. Can you clarify the 8 weeks versus 24 weeks, please? Is 24 weeks only for loans dispersed June 5th and later?
So for loans that are approved by your lender June 1st and later, you should automatically get the 24 weeks. If your loan was approved before June 5th, you're going to have to make that request to your lender. And it's going to have to be an agreement between you and your lender to do that. But if it's approved after June 5th, you should get the 24 weeks. Absolutely. Great.
One more live question, LaTanya. I'll just read it. I want to use the alternative payroll period rather than the initial 8-week from funding date. That would be for us May 1 through June 26. Do we have to have a payroll on June 26 or our regular June 30th payment date? What else do we need to know about staying in the rules for that alternative period?
So this is someone who's looking to apply for a loan, clearly, right? They haven't applied yet? Because I may need Lane's help on this one to see what the lender is looking.
Yeah, go ahead, Lane.
Yeah, LaTanya, I think what they're asking is, so when you fill out that 11-page PPP forgiveness application, they give you they give you 2 options for payroll. And so I know we're waiting on them to update the forgiveness application to actually reflect the 24-week period versus the 8. But they've already used their funds, it sounds like, in their initial 8-week period, and they're wanting to use that alternative payroll period. So the way the PPP funds work, it's on cash-based accounting, which most of us do not run payroll under cash-based accounting. We usually run payroll in arrears. And so they're wanting to use that alternative payroll period, I believe, is what they're asking in this question. And so I think just from an accounting standpoint, they're asking how that alternative period works. And the main thing I think they need to remember is that alternative period has to still be after you receive the funds. It can't be payroll money that was processed before they got their PPP funds, but they can start their payroll using that alternative date as well, versus using the cash basis 8 weeks. So say, for instance, you run payroll on the 15th and the last day of the month. So you would then start your 8-week time period to correspond with your pay period that either ends on the 15th or ends on the 30th.
I'm going to agree with that.
Thank you for your help on that, Lane.
All right, same person asking a follow-up. The calculations for the FTE rules seem daunting. We use a semi-monthly payroll period, not a weekly period. Do we have to do the weekly calculation?
So let me just tell you this, and that the answer is probably going to be not sure yet, and here's why. So
Okay.
I mentioned to you that there was a Senate hearing last Monday with my boss, who's the head of the Small Business Administration, and Secretary Mnuchin, who's the head of Treasury, and both agencies have been working together to put out the guidance. The loan forgiveness form that was put out about, I think, 4 weeks ago now, honestly, the time is escaping me, was more complicated than anyone ever expected. And what happened last Monday was my boss and Secretary Mnuchin both committed to Congress that form was going to get modified and simplified. So I'm going to be honest to you, I don't have an answer to that question yet, but we're still waiting for more guidance from SBA headquarters, one on how loan forgiveness is going to work, and to simplify some of those items that are currently listed on that form. So I would say stay tuned as it concerns that process and those more specific questions. Okay.
And what's the best way for this person and other people to stay tuned, LaTanya? Or even Lane?
Absolutely. Definitely sign up for updates on our website to get our newsletter, but just call our office, 615-736-5881. And just so, I should have mentioned this and I should have put it in the slide, I totally forgot. For the rest of June, we're going to have Ask SBA virtual office hours here in the state of Tennessee. So every Tuesday and every Thursday, we're going to do a Zoom call with anybody who can call in. And the intent is we're going to answer those questions that we in Tennessee have answers for. And for those that don't, we're going to compile them and shoot them up to SBA headquarters. So by that Thursday, we can get on and give you those answers. And if not, you can call our office in between Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. And of course, anytime during the week, and we can get those answers to you individually. So there's still some unanswered questions out there, I admit. And like I said, we're going to use our opportunity when we open back up our virtual office hours, which is every Tuesday and Thursday at 2 Central Time. Just call my office and get the details. And if not, we don't have the answer, we're going to shoot them up to headquarters and try to get them to you quickly.
Okay. Great. Thank you. That's great advice. Lane, you and I talked about this a little bit before, and LaTanya, please feel free to jump in. But I think last time I checked, it was about $130 billion nationwide still left in round 2. So my question is, and maybe this is anybody that's watching over Zoom, what's stopping businesses from applying for the second round? Lane, you mentioned you've actually gone through your portfolio already, but I'd love to hear your perspective, maybe LaTanya, since this money is still sitting there, for people to be able to apply for the loan.
Matt, that's a great question because, when we got round 2 funding, we all thought that money would be gone in a matter of days. And it kept dragging on as people started returning their funds that maybe did not think that they qualified any longer. And so there is still around $130 billion that's still left out there. And we don't envision that all of that will probably be used by that date of June 30th. And from our perspective, what we've seen from the business clients that we work with is that most everybody that needed money for payroll, they've gotten money for payroll now through the PPP program. And they now need money for other things that are not necessarily covered under the PPP program. But one of the things, LaTanya touched on this on her slides, the CARES Act had several different loan programs in there for small business owners. And one of their debt relief options that was part of that program was under the 7A SBA lending program that you get 6 months worth of loan payments made. And so that's on existing SBA loans. If you already had one, you're getting 6 months of loan payments. But just say you have a small business owner that they need to go buy inventory now so that they can reopen their shop. Well, they can come to a preferred SBA lender and they can apply for a new 7A SBA loan and get 6 months worth of their payments made for that expense that's not necessarily covered under the PPP loan. So I think that's really why there's money left there, is that business owners still have a need for capital. It may just not be for payroll right now. It may be for other expenses. But the SBA did put in place some programs to help with that as well.
Okay, great. LaTanya, anything you want to add on that?
I think also, and Lane is absolutely right. And I think I will also add fear. I think this was the first time in my entire SBA career, and I've been with SBA since 2003, where SBA has been in the news every 30 seconds. And this is the first time in my SBA career where there are YouTube page popping up by folks trying to help people understand the process, where the news was saying, oh, these corporations got PPP and they shouldn't have. So there's been a lot of negative media. Some of it may have been accurate. And there's been a lot of folks out there trying to get guidance and information out because we did roll it out so fast. So it was a lot of confusion. So I think that now that we're in round 2 and things are dying down, just like Lane said, we thought the money was going to go in 2 days, to be honest. I think there's a lot of fear because there was so much media attention, so much confusion with how the process worked. And then there was so much negative media attention about businesses having to return their money. So I'm hoping that one of the reasons why we want to do these virtual office hours is that businesses know, 1, that there's money still there, 2, that lenders are still waiting to do your application, and 3, we're better, more equipped now to help you with how it's going to work because yes, the rules kept changing, but guess what? The rules are all out there now, so we can help you navigate that. I will also mention that even with the forgiveness piece, there's lots of confusion now. People are thinking, oh, I'll never get my loan forgiven. But please remember what I said at the very top of this. With all the changes, SBA and Treasury keeps putting this at the forefront. The purpose was to keep your employees employed. And the reason why those safe harbor provisions were put in there with the changes on the 5th was if you took all those actions that you could to bring your people back, to resume business operations, the goal is that you should get your loan forgiven. So I think there's a lot of fear out there, people, just because there was so much confusion. And I'm hoping that, there's less fear now because all the rules are now out and lenders have had experience. We at SBA have had experience and some borrowers have had experience getting it through. So hopefully the word of mouth and the less media attention will get folks, applying.
Well, that's great. And that's one of the reasons we wanted to do this program today, in addition to talking about the forgiveness, which is really important for people that have made application, but also let people know, whether you're watching or you want to send this to a friend or colleague, that program is still available. There still is money nationwide for it. So that's really important. Let me ask a question. I think LaTanya, Lane, both of you could answer this. If what we've seen with all the attention around SBA and PPP, there's probably a lot of scams out there. Yes. So I'd love for you all just to take a moment and let people know that are watching, what are scams that they should watch out for? What's the most common thing people are using to try to scam business owners out of their capital?
That is a great point, Matt. Yeah. And we have seen a lot of them. I know LaTanya's seen it. One of the things we're seeing are phishing emails where somebody is reaching out to you, acting like they're the SBA or acting like they're your bank and asking you to apply for one of these, whether it's the EIDL loan or a PPP loan. And just so you know, we're not proactively reaching out to anyone to give them a link to apply. So if you're getting an email that looks like it's from SBA or it looks like it's from your bank to apply for one of these loans, that's more than likely a phishing scam. And I'd love for LaTanya to talk about once the business owners originally applied for the EIDL loan, then SBA was reaching out, like she said, with that email for them to go in and then finish their application through a portal. And I'm getting those emails forwarded to me where the clients are worried that it is a scam and it's not necessarily the SBA. So one of the things I would love, LaTanya, is if we could actually publish what a legitimate email looks like from SBA so the clients know it's not a scam, because I have seen some that are scams and then I've seen some that are legit, but it's really hard for the clients to know, and they're desperate for this money. So they're really eager to open and start filling out whatever it is because they really need that capital right now.
That is an excellent point, Lane. And actually we'll take you up on that. What we'll do is we'll reach out to our disaster people so we can actually have a screenshot of exactly what they should expect when they get that email about that economic injury disaster loan, because you're right. Folks were confused and we had to take a deep dive with our disaster team and go, wait a minute, what is this? So we can tell our business owners. So yeah, we'll make a commitment to make sure we can publish that, post that, and share that on our Tuesday and Thursday. I think, yeah, and the phishing emails that she mentioned, yeah, we've gotten a lot of inquiries from folks. I think the big thing to remember for all borrowers, please remember you don't have to pay anybody to apply for a PPP or an EIDL loan. There is no fee and there's no cost to you. The only fees and costs you should be paying are those that you choose to pay. If you call your accountant and say, help me with this, but you should not be paying anybody anything to apply or to help you apply for PPP and EIDL.
Yeah. That's great, LaTanya, and that's probably the biggest tell. Obviously, someone that's looking for money up front to apply, but that's great advice just to make sure as people are looking that they don't get caught in one of those scams. We actually have 4 questions on the live question. The first one actually is near and dear to my heart. It's from Amy at the Bellevue Harpeth Chamber. Any update on whether or not 501c6s like Chambers of Commerce may qualify for the PPP at some point?
No update, and I honestly believe that if it wasn't in that June 5th signing by the president, it probably won't happen because I have not heard that there's going to be any other changes between now and June 30th. And I know that has been an issue for a lot of chambers, but if it wasn't in there, don't know.
Yeah, I've been in touch with our federal delegation about the importance of this. I mean, Chambers of Commerce around the country certainly on the front lines of helping small business. And I think the really good ones have proven their value through this difficult time. I'm hoping, Amy, if you're watching, that there may be some relief from the state of Tennessee and some of the things that they put out recently. But certainly the work chambers have done across the state have really been focused on helping meet the immediate needs of their members. So I hope something comes along with that. LaTanya, I guess, or Lane, either one, can you address the last comment in the chat, which I can't see, about the EIDL forgiveness versus being used for payroll along with PPP?
Let me look at the question at the chat, but let me give you the broad answer before I read it. We're getting a lot of questions from people wondering how to use their EIDL loan funds simply because there are limits with the PPP on how to use it. So here's the bottom line. Use the funds for different purposes. The PPP, remember, was used to keep your workforce employed. There's that 60-40 split, or rather the minimum of 60% that has to be used towards your payroll to get forgiveness. So as far as the EIDL loan is concerned, it's a working capital loan. You're supposed to be used for those ordinary business expenses that you have always had to keep your business afloat. And that could include payroll. And there is no process for forgiveness for the EIDL loan. It is a loan. You treat it just like a normal loan. You pay it, you get a bill every month. But it's those ordinary and necessary business expenses you need to keep your business afloat, the purpose of the EIDL loan. And let me glance over at the chat. And then, so the question is, I think I see it now. The question is, if EIDL advance is used for payroll at the same time PPP is used for payroll, it is no longer forgiven. I'm sorry, wrong one. That wasn't the question. Let me go back. The question was, does the $10,000 EIDL advance reduce the total forgivable amount you are able to claim for the PPP loan? So the question is, does the advance reduce the total forgivable amount you're able to use the PPP loan? Well, you can't double dip. That's number one, right? And the other thing to keep in mind for the EIDL advance, no one's coming back and asking you, what are you using that money for? But remember, you cannot double dip. Your lender may ask you, what did you use that money for? When it's time to submit your application for forgiveness, to make sure that you use the PPP loan for payroll. And I'm just making sure, because my staff did respond to the question. I just want to make sure I read this. And yes, remember, EIDL advance can be used for payroll prior to or after the PPP has been expended for payroll, but not at the same time. So you can't double dip.
That's a great point, LaTanya. You can't double dip. And then when you fill out that PPP application, Matt, one of the questions on that application, you have to put in your EIDL advance portion, and that does subtract dollar for dollar from the forgiveness. So just to use round numbers, let's say you have a $100,000 PPP loan. you apply for forgiveness and you put in there that you got a $10,000 EIDL advance, you now only have $90,000 of forgiveness for your PPP loan.
Okay.
And so that's kind of how that calculation works as far as the application is written today. Now, like LaTanya said, that application, we are definitely expecting changes from SBA in the near future, but as the application stands today, when you do the calculation in the application, it subtracts dollar for dollar from your forgiveness on the PPP loan, just that advance portion. So if you got an EIDL loan, say for $150,000, and you got a $10,000 advance, so a total of $160,000 for your EIDL, only that $10,000 advance is subtracted from the PPP forgiveness component.
Okay, great. That's very helpful. Great clarification. Two questions left open. One is about 501c6 that we covered. I think that's to be determined, certainly not any time within the next month, I believe. And the next question is, if you apply for the second phase loan, are you required to use the same lender that was used for the first phase?
Well, you can only get one PPP per business. So I'm not exactly sure what that question is intending.
Yeah, I'm not sure either. Okay.
Yeah, we've gotten questions like that of people that maybe went and paid their loan back because they thought they weren't eligible and then they wanted to apply again. And we are not able, literally the E-Trans system that we use for SBA, if you got a PPP loan, even though you paid it back, we cannot go get another loan number for you in that system if you've already applied and gotten a loan.
Okay, that's good to know. Let's see. Okay, no more live questions. But again, if you're watching, you have questions, please feel free to type those in. Here we go. We got one. If you are close to the end of your 8 weeks, can you change payroll to weekly?
I wouldn't advise people to change their payroll. I would just say to keep your payroll going the same as you normally would. But when you give us your payroll records, we're only going to count those 8 weeks. But there's no need for you to change your accounting to make it meet the 8-week time period if you don't want. You can just, unless you're wanting to apply for forgiveness like right away. So that would be the only thing I would say is if you're, your payroll maybe runs another 2 weeks after your 8 weeks ends and you want to go ahead and apply for forgiveness, well, you could run just one last weekly payroll to have the cutoff match when you're applying for your 8 weeks. But I've really encouraged people, especially those that use third-party payroll processors, the information they give to us as the bank is great for helping us calculate your forgiveness, and there's no reason to need to change that up to make it match your 8-week time period for your loan. We can easily go into your payroll records, take the days that match up with that 8-week time period, and see that you use the money appropriately.
Okay. LaTanya, anything to add?
Just that there's over $100 billion left. And if you don't already have,
yes.
If you don't already
and none of those
have
are for chambers of commerce. We've already covered that. No, and they're for 501c6s.
Right. You can get an idle loan. It may take a while. It's a backlog there, but you can get an idle loan.
Yeah, we can do that. Yep. Let's see. Okay. Yeah, okay. If you've already received the PPP, are you able to apply for an idle loan since there's over $100 billion left?
Yes.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yeah, the idle's a different bucket. So it's got a different bucket from the PPP, which I think is good for people to know that, even though the idle loan, they did lower that loan amount to $150,000, it's not taking from the bucket for the PPP money. So that PPP money will still be there until people use it all. And at this point, I'm not sure if it will all get used. So definitely get in there and apply for it because it's still available.
Yep.
So, Lane, I'll start with this, and LaTanya, please jump in. I'd love to hear your perspective. What have you heard from your clients since they got their PPP? Was this really the lifeline for them? I'd love any sort of anecdotal stories that you've got, LaTanya, anything that stands out from the people who received the loan.
Definitely. We have had some really encouraging stories from people that they would not have been able to continue on operating their business without this PPP money. So those have been wonderful to receive. And then with the passing of the Flexibility Act, we've heard from our restaurant owners, and those are the ones that were really excited about that flexibility, because honestly, a lot of those owners were sitting on the funds and not using them quite yet because they weren't able to bring their staff back. So now that they've got a longer runway to use that money, they have been very grateful and very thankful for those funds. And they're really excited to start hiring people back and get back to their, business of being a small business owner. But we've had just some absolutely wonderful success stories. And like you said, I mean, we gave out loans as small as, $10,000, all the way up to the max of the 10 million. But it's really been those smaller business owners that we've heard from of just thanking us that, it's helped their employees stay employed and get a paycheck.
Great, thanks. LaTanya, anything you want to share along that same line?
I've heard from business owners who, one, were happy to get the PPP, absolutely, to help keep them afloat. And I've also heard, this is the one common theme I've heard from small business owners, and I'm ratting y'all out because usually this is just me one-on-one talking to them. They go, oh my God, this has forced me to get my ducks in a row, to get my paperwork in a row. I talked to one business owner on Friday. She said, I've had an LLC for years. I paid my $300 a year, but I still filed my taxes as a sole proprietor. She's like, why was I doing that? So just making sure you have, we know that business owners are the best risk takers in America. We know that you keep the economy afloat. But when it comes to applying for something, whether it's an SBA loan, whether it's government contracting certification, that's when someone's going to take a deep dive into what your paper looks like. Business is probably doing great, very successful. But when it comes to those financial statements and the tax returns and the corporate documents for other SBA programs, that's when it's like, oh, Lord, my paperwork is not in, my ducks aren't in a row there. So a lot of business owners are saying to us, this is forcing me to get my paperwork right. And on that note, they're asking us, SBA, can you do some workshops for us on getting our paperwork right? So we're going to launch some of that soon.
Oh, yeah. Good. Well, that's great. I mean, that's good that it's informed you of what kind of content people are looking to do to make their business even better. You want to add on to that, Elaine?
I think that is a great, unforeseen benefit of this program for sure. Yeah. I know from a banker's perspective, that is the number one thing that is going to help your banker be able to make sure you get 100% forgiveness is if you have clean, detailed records. So not just the payroll records, but those other expenses that you can use the 40% on, making sure that you can show us a paper trail there, that you have the invoices, that you have bank statements supporting that you use that money appropriately. And so the better and more detailed those records, the higher likelihood that you're going to get 100% forgiveness. And so that's a great thing for business owners. They're getting their house in order and they may get 100% forgiveness now because they did a better job at their bookkeeping.
Well, and that's it. Is the 100% is forgiveness really around bookkeeping? Is that the most important thing people need to know out of this?
It is. I mean, if they come to us and everything is a mess and we cannot track where that money was going, we have to be able to prove to SBA beyond a shadow of a doubt that they used that money on payroll or they used it on those interest expenses, utilities, and lease payments. If we can't adequately show that they used the money on that, they're going to get denied at least a portion of that loan amount, and they will have an actual loan payment due for it. So it's important that they keep very detailed, accurate records.
Great. LaTanya?
Yep. Lane is correct. And I think, go ahead, I'm sorry.
Yep. Get your stuff together. Okay, great.
Yep.
Two more. Yeah, two more questions as we come to the end of this conversation today. We may have covered this, but just to be clear, do you have to use the same lender as you used for the PPP? I assume that's referring to the EIDL. Can you use two different lenders?
So the EIDL loan is directly through SBA.
Right. Okay.
So you will apply directly through SBA online. LaTanya, I think, gave the website for that, but that's the SBA website. The portal, like LaTanya was saying, is currently closed for businesses that are non-ag related, but we do anticipate that portal will hopefully go live again in the very near future. You can apply for a loan up to $150,000, and the EIDL loan calculates 6 months worth of operating expenses. So like the PPP loan calculated 10 weeks of payroll, and that's how you come up with the loan amount. The EIDL loan program calculates 6 months of operating expenses. So it's going to be important there when you apply for the EIDL loan that you also have good records, because they need to be able to accurately account for 6 months worth of operating expenses. But that goes directly through SBA. PPP loans go directly through, your bank or a fintech lender. There's several lenders. You just want to check and verify on the SBA's website that they are approved PPP lender to make sure it's not fraudulent.
Right.
And then the Main Street loan program, which some people may actually be referring to that. That is another set of loans that will be coming through from the Treasury in the very near future. That's supposed to roll out in mid-July now. And that you can apply to any lender. If you've got PPP and now want to apply for a Main Street loan, you don't have to go directly to your lender, but the likelihood of you getting that loan, it's going to be the greatest through the bank that you bank with.
Okay, great. Good. And the final question as we wrap up, how soon will the final forgiveness forms be available? LaTanya, I assume that maybe just to stay tuned.
Yeah, stay tuned. I wish I knew. We're waiting for it too here at Tennessee from our SBA headquarters.
Yeah.
So
okay,
they told Congress soon, so I'm banking on soon.
Okay. What if I pay the wrong expenses with the loan, but have other correct expenses I could have used?
So that's where when Lane was talking about the portion of the loan that's forgiven. So, and having your records right. And that's where I mentioned making sure you looked at the list of eligible expenses that can go towards that 40%. Because if you use part of that PPP loan for something that's ineligible, meaning payroll costs and the expenses that are listed in the rules, then that piece would be a portion that you would have to pay back at that 1%. Now remember, it's 1%.
Yep. All right.
Yep.
Well, thank you all so much, Lane, for being in the studio, LaTanya for being on Zoom. I really appreciate it. You and your team are fantastic. Like I said, I don't know about the other 49 states, but I feel like we've got the best SBA team in the country. So thank you so much, LaTanya, Lane, for being here. Thank you, AP Live, for hosting us. Thank you to the Bellevue-Harpeth Chamber of Commerce, Murray Alliance, the Spring Hill Chamber for partnering for this important event. And thank you, Pinnacle, for being the presenting sponsor today. I greatly appreciate it. One final thing, I mentioned this earlier, wear a mask. This mask protects other people. When other people wear it, it protects you. So wear a mask when you go out in confined spaces. Thank you for your continued investment in our community through your investment in Williamson, Inc. And stay tuned for a message from our friends at AP Live as we close out today's program.
There will always be a need for in-person meetings and gatherings, but sometimes that's not possible.
We still need to work together as teams. We just need to do it in a new way, and we can help facilitate those conversations just all online.
We're able to offer some virtual solutions that are going to allow for that business to still take place and for those important conversations to still happen. Whether it's online polling, whether it's a digital touchscreen, whether it's a fireside chat or a panel, whatever is best going to communicate your message virtually, we can make that happen.
AP Live has been doing virtual meetings for a very long time now. We've been doing them all over the world, and that expertise and that experience is what will allow us to help you communicate your message and be collaborative as we move forward in the digital world.